For more than 2 decades, Juanita Bynum has stood as one of the most recognizable voices in modern ministry. A prophetess, an evangelist, and a woman whose sermons have shaken stadiums and reshaped lives. She built her platform on boldness, transparency, and the unfiltered belief that God could pull anyone out of any storm. But on April 18th, the woman known for preaching deliverance suddenly found herself on the other side of the headline, arrested, photographed, and thrust into a scandal she says was completely misrepresented. Now, after days of confusion, commentary, and speculation, Juanita Bynum has broken her silence, and according to her, everything the world thought they knew about her arrest was wrong. She says this wasn't a fall from grace, it was an unfortunate encounter with fraud, miscommunication, and a civil matter she insists she never knew existed. What was portrayed as a dramatic takedown of a televangelist, she claims, was nothing more than a wrongful detainment rooted in a business dispute gone terribly wrong. The story begins with a warrant, one connected to a lawsuit in Dallas involving a promoter named Al Wash. He claimed Bynum owed over $100,000 for an event she allegedly failed to honor. When Juanita didn't appear in court, a warrant was issued, and that warrant is what led to her arrest. To the outside world, it looked like a gospel star caught in a financial scandal, but Bynum says the truth is far from the narrative that spread across social media. In a statement posted to her website, she describes the arrest as a shock, not because she was running from accountability, but because she claims she never even knew she had a court date. According to her, she believed she and Wash had already reached a peaceful resolution months earlier. She thought the matter was over. She thought the agreement they made privately had ended the dispute. And so, when deputies detained her, she said she was blindsided, confused, and deeply concerned about how easily misinformation could target a public figure. What makes this situation even more unexpected is the promoter's response. Instead of doubling down on accusations, Al Wash sent Bynum an email after her arrest affirming his respect for her. He called her spectacular, insisted he didn't want to destroy her career, and expressed hope they could still work together. This unusual moment, where the accuser defended the accused, raised even more questions. How could someone be arrested for failing to appear in a case when both parties believed the dispute was already being handled privately? How did communication break down so severely that an evangelist known worldwide ended up in handcuffs over a civil misunderstanding? Bynum says the answer lies in mismanagement, and she's naming names. In her statement, she points directly at Holly Carter and Releve Entertainment, accusing them of breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, and mishandling the business transaction in a way that she says left her blindsided and misrepresented. To Juanita, this wasn't her failure, it was the failure of people who were supposed to protect her interests and her name. And she insists on one thing: she has not been found guilty of anything. Not fraud, not deception, not unethical behavior. She calls the entire ordeal an unfair embarrassment rooted in a misunderstanding, one she refuses to let define her. But controversy is not new to Juanita Bynum. In fact, this arrest is only the latest chapter in a life marked by both extraordinary influence and intense public scrutiny. For years, her ministry was overshadowed by the trauma of 2008, when her then-husband, Bishop Thomas Weeks, physically assaulted her in a hotel parking lot, an attack that shocked the Christian world and ended in divorce. After surviving that painful chapter, Bynum continued preaching, but she was never fully shielded from criticism or speculation. Then in 2012, she shocked listeners during a radio interview by openly confessing that she had engaged in sexual relationships with women earlier in her life, a revelation that created another wave of public conversation, judgment, and theological debate. Through every storm, Juanita Bynum has insisted on transparency. She has spoken openly about her past, her trauma, and her struggles. But now, she says this most recent scandal was not born from her actions or her choices, but from misinformation and mishandled business. To her supporters, this moment is a reminder that even spiritual leaders are not immune to legal confusion, business conflicts, or the messiness of human relationships. To her critics, it raises fresh questions about the blurred lines between ministry and money. But to Juanita, this is a turning point, one she refuses to let destroy her name. At the end of her statement, she points to a new chapter unfolding in her life. She has recently been appointed a Goodwill Ambassador for Bayelsa State in southern Nigeria, a role she says reflects both her global influence and her commitment to international service. She posted photographs of the ceremony, smiling alongside Nigerian dignitaries, as a symbolic reminder that her calling extends far beyond American controversy. She ends her message with a declaration, not of anger, but of resolve. She says she will no longer allow character attacks to go unanswered. She will no longer remain silent when misinformation spreads unchecked. And she insists that despite everything she has endured, she is still standing, still preaching, and still committed to the mission God gave her. Because if Juanita Bynum's life has proven anything, it is that she has survived storms far worse than an unexpected arrest. She has rebuilt before, she has risen before, and in her eyes, this moment, this confusion, this misunderstanding, this public embarrassment, is just another test. Another chapter. Another chance to show the world that resilience is not built in peace, but in fire. What happened after Juanita Bynum walked out of that courtroom was not the triumphant moment many expected. It was a complicated, emotionally charged awakening that revealed just how deeply this incident had wounded her reputation, her ministry, and her personal life. Because while she insisted she had done nothing wrong, the world had already reacted. Social media moved faster than the truth. Blogs circulated half-stories. Headlines stripped away context, and within hours, an arrest photo became the only evidence many people needed to form an opinion. For a woman whose ministry was built on transparency, authority, and prophetic conviction, the humiliation was immediate and painful. She had weathered criticism before, but this was different. This wasn't a sermon people debated, or a personal revelation she willingly shared. This was an image of a prophetess in custody, stripped from its context, and used as a weapon by those who had been waiting for her to stumble. Her supporters were stunned. Many were confused. Some were angry. How could Juanita Bynum, one of the most recognizable evangelists of her generation, be arrested over a civil matter? How could a dispute they believed was already resolved suddenly escalate into something so severe? And why did it all explode publicly before she even had a chance to explain herself? Inside her ministry, the reaction was immediate. Staff members scrambled to release statements, clarify timelines, and reassure supporters that this was not a criminal act. Her team insisted she wasn't evading the law, she had simply never been informed of a required appearance. They reminded the public that civil warrants don't indicate guilt. They often indicate miscommunication, but damage control could only do so much. Because by then, the narrative had already been shaped. And in the digital age, reactions move faster than reality. And yet, there was another layer to this story that made the situation even more complex. The promoter accusing her, the very man connected to the warrant, publicly defended her the next day. He reiterated his respect for her. He called her a spectacular person. He insisted he had no desire to harm her career. And he affirmed that he believed they had been moving toward a resolution. This moment left many observers puzzled. Why would a promoter defend the person accused of owing him money? Why would someone praise a woman he had just taken to civil court? And why did his email sound more supportive of Juanita than accusatory? To critics, this looked like an attempt to soften backlash. To supporters, it looked like proof she had been wronged. And to Juanita, it was validation that something deeper had gone wrong behind the scenes, something involving poor representation, bad communication, and individuals she now publicly accused of breaching her trust. This is where the story shifts from legal confusion to personal betrayal. Because according to Bynum, the root of the problem wasn't the promoter at all. It was the people who were supposed to manage her affairs, those she says failed her at the most crucial moment. Her accusations were pointed and direct: breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, and misleading representation. She claimed that business managers misrepresented her, that she was blindsided by their actions, that the fraud wasn't coming from her, it was committed against her. For anyone who has followed her ministry over the years, this was not the first time internal relationships led to public disaster. But for Juanita, this moment marked a turning point. Because unlike previous controversies where she admitted her shortcomings, this time she stood firm. She refused to apologize for something she didn't do. She refused to carry shame for someone else's mistake. And she refused to let the world rewrite her truth. Still, the public reaction was mixed. Some people sympathized with her. Others revived old criticisms. Some brought up her past marriage and abuse case, claiming this incident fit a pattern of chaos. Others argued she was being unfairly targeted because of her influence. her bold prophetic image, and her refusal to conform to traditional expectations of female clergy. The church world especially struggled to navigate the narrative. Pastors defended her from pulpits. Gospel bloggers questioned the details. Ministries reposted her statement to protect her integrity. And yet, for every voice defending her, another questioned why financial disputes seemed to follow Christian celebrities so often. But Juanita Bynum did what she has always done when the world questions her. She shifted the focus away from scandal and onto her calling. Within days of her release, she announced her appointment as a goodwill ambassador for Bios Estate in Nigeria. Photos surfaced, elegant ceremonies, diplomatic gatherings, dignitaries shaking her hand. It was a declaration that she refused to let an arrest define her, that her influence extended beyond American gossip, that her global ministry was bigger than a lawsuit, and possibly it was her way of saying she had already moved on, even if her critics hadn't. But behind the public confidence, one thing is clear: this arrest left a scar, not on her record, but on her spirit. It reminded her that reputation can be stolen in a moment, even when the truth is on your side. It reminded her that success in ministry does not shield anyone from human error or legal chaos. And it reminded her that the higher the calling, the greater the scrutiny. Still, Juanita Bynum insists she will not be silenced. She will not be shamed. And she will not let this become the chapter people use to define her life. Because for a woman who has survived abuse, controversy, betrayal, and global criticism, this moment may have been humiliating. But it was not the end. It was a warning. It was a lesson. And it was a reminder that even prophets bleed, but they still get back up.